If you suspect your husband is a narcissist or if he's been diagnosed as one, you got to wonder, is there any hope that he's ever going to change? How can you protect your self worth and make your marriage thrive? Well, today's guest has that exact experience and is sharing the strategies that worked to change her narcissistic husband without him even realizing it. I'm Laura Doyle, New York Times bestselling author, and I was the perfect wife until I got married. This is the Empowered Wife podcast. My guest Jade was ready to announce divorce after enduring verbal abuse and stonewalling. Then she learned the 6 intimacy skills and she discovered that the biggest challenge in her marriage wasn't at all what she thought. Today, her husband makes her laugh. The intimacy has gone from zero to hero, and their children are happier. She's going to tell us what she did so you can do it too. Jade, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me. I'm also very excited to be here and can't wait to share my story with you and hopefully also just encourage somebody else that's going through what went through in the bad old days.
Ugh, I love that. What a gift. Thank you so much. All right, well let's get right to it then. Let's talk about those bad old days. What was going on in your marriage?
Yes, so ultimately, I mean, my husband and I have been together now 21 years, married for 14 of those. So we ultimately grew up together, and in that time, you're discovering yourself and finding yourself. And we had also sort of suffered three big traumas in our lives together in the last couple of years. So the most recent bad old days, I really thought that my husband was the biggest challenge of our marriage, but I did later on realize that it was actually me, and a lot of the eggshells that we'd been walking on might have been me. But before that, I really thought it was all him. So we were walking on eggshells in our house. My husband was shouting at me and the kids. He'd stonewall us. It was very confusing and left me feeling scared and confused and overwhelmed and unsafe. And yeah, I'd gotten to a point where I just was no longer happy and I was looking forward to going to work. Most people look forward to the weekend so they can spend time with their family. I was looking forward to going to work so I could get away from mine and away from the loudness. It was very loud, my house. And yeah, like I mentioned, like, with verbal abuse, it was shouting and talking down. My husband never swore at me, but there was a lot of talking down and making me feel like I don't know what's what, and also talking down to the children a lot of the time. And yeah, I mean, I've got a list. I can tell you what the bad old days were like, with never receiving apologies ever in 21 years,
Oh,
never receiving compliments, feeling lonely and pathetic, trying to fill the gap and overscheduling us. There was a lot going on.
yeah. It is so terrifying too to see your kids being treated that way. I mean, your mama heart probably was just devastated. It's one thing, I mean, it's devastating for you as well. But seeing those little people get yelled at, that's got to be very
It
scary.
was. And I found myself in a position that I never planned on taking on. Before I had kids, I knew exactly what I was going to do with them until I actually had them. And I changed. I changed 110%. I became defensive. I always used to get in between my husband and my children. Whenever I thought he was parenting too harshly, shouting at them or raising his voice or saying something that could be mentally damaging in my non-expert opinion, but in my motherly opinion or my opinion that's been informed by Instagram bloggers, I
Yes.
used to just
The best source ever, right? Yeah.
best source ever. Um, I used to I used to get in between him and the kids often, and this would blow up into the biggest fight in front of my children. And I honestly thought it was him. I thought he was the problem. He was being loud around them. He was fighting. He was picking fights with me in front of the kids around bedtime and bath time and homework time. My daughter actually started suffering from anxiety quite a lot. Obviously other things at school were happening, but at home there was a lot of tension, which aided or, fired and fueled the anxiety. And my little boy had become constipated and angry. So there were physical manifestations of what was going on in their little worlds and their little hearts that they didn't understand. And at some point, my daughter, she was 8 years old at the time, had asked me twice to leave her father. And it
At
was
eight
never
years old.
something at 8 years
Wow.
old. It was
Wow.
never something that, she'd really been exposed to much, bar maybe some friends at school whose parents were split up. But in our family history, everyone kind of stayed committed for life. And yeah, that opened up my eyes. I really looked deep and hard at where this unhappiness was coming from. I mean, when it's just you, you can be a martyr, you can suffer through it, you can say you're staying together for the kids, but when the kids start suffering, what do you do?
I don't know. You must have been crushed and scared for your kids,
That's
especially,
it. I was very
so.
scared.
Mm.
Yeah, I was very scared and unsure. And then what sort of fueled it was I didn't have a safe space where I could reflect any of this. My best friend at the time was going through a divorce, and I know that the company you keep matters. And it's really hard to then be supported by people who are also going through a very difficult time. And that also it changes your framework and your point of reference and the counsel you get. I was too embarrassed to go to my friends that have happy marriages. I was too embarrassed to go to my mother who had a happy marriage until my father passed. I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't have a safe space.
You're all
And
alone.
that's it. I felt so isolated and alone. And I knew, I think of myself as an emotionally intelligent person. So I knew there's more to it. And I started reflecting and diving deep and going for counseling and therapy and all the things. And I knew that I mentioned earlier we'd gone through some traumas. So there was a time before COVID where I had my husband almost lost his life, and he had a ruptured colon. So he was very ill, and I was pregnant with our second child at the time.
Mm.
So I became very controlling in that time to manage my own crazy world. And shortly after that, he was fine. My husband was fine. The baby was born. And then we lost my father very unexpectedly and suddenly. And I think I became numb in that process because I'd already had so much to deal with. And then I almost lost my son when he was 12 months old. Also to illness. He survived, but it was a very traumatic time. So the three traumas with the three male figures in my life impacted me in a very, very drastic and huge way. And I think in that time I became so controlling to make sure that everything is right and perfect and the way it should be always.
It's understandable, right? You just wanted to avoid the horrible feeling of losing, yeah, the three most important men in your life. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's understandable.
That's it. And through this a time when I became so controlling, I also became numb, like I mentioned. I won't even say sad. Honestly, I didn't have highs or lows. Everything was just plain and blasé. And I'm assuming, now that I know the skills, I'm assuming that I'd become a little bit uninteresting. I neglected self care. I became angry. I became resentful. A lot started happening and brewing. But all I could focus on was my marriage. My marriage was like my hobby almost. The kids were my hobby, and the marriage was my hobby, and everything, all my focus and energy went into that and making it as perfect as I possibly could.
That's a great way of explaining it. That became your hobby. Yeah, because there's so much there that you couldn't control, but it felt like maybe you could at the time. Yeah, and you wanted to so desperately because of how much pain you had gone through recently. Yeah.
Absolutely, I wanted to. And I think in that process, I'd obviously also sort of driven my husband a little bit crazy, but I still thought that it was him driving me crazy. And I'll never forget, shortly before COVID, that's when this sort of the bad old days really started between the two of us, where we'd always be irritated with each other. Anything we said, like I never knew what I could say, what was safe to say. What if he explodes? What if he turns it on me? I felt like I was walking on eggshells. So I just sort of started avoiding him a little bit and doing my own thing and focusing my energy more on the kids, but also controlling the children. And, they were little at the time, but everything around them, their schedules, what they should eat, how they should eat, what medication they should take, bedtime routines. I took it all on myself. And because I knew how to do it right. And funny enough, at that time, I always used to preach to all my other girlfriends and say, no, let your husband do it. Just pretend you don't know how to. Relinquish control, let them do it. And I thought I was doing this, but I wasn't at all, because I was telling him what to do and how to do it and when to do it, but allowing him to. And we actually went out one day, and he raised his voice at my daughter, who was quite little at the time. I think, what was she, like 5 years old at the time? And I said, oh, my poor child. And I grabbed her away and I pulled her. He was never physical with them, but verbally, it was harsh words, loud words. And I just grabbed her away. I said, my poor child. And he said, what do you mean, your poor child? And we ignored each other all the way home, put the kids in front of the TV, and went outside and had a serious conversation and said, maybe we should just call this quits, because clearly it's not working. And in that moment, we still loved each other enough to have a civilized conversation, a very logical conversation, where we literally said, well, how would this work? What would it look like? Should we do it? Shouldn't we? And then we both agreed to go for some counseling with a therapist we'd seen before. We went for the counseling session. One session, I think we got like halfway through it, and we just made a decision that we would not get a divorce. We would not separate, because it's not in our best interest, for various reasons, for the children primarily, financially, logical reasons. But still, there was that spark missing, the intimacy was missing, the happiness was missing. We then went on to lockdown with COVID, obviously, and we forgot about this discussion. We moved on with our lives. And in that time, funny enough, things got a lot better. We loved lockdown. We loved being in each other's presence. I always say, before I met you and before I read your book, I always used to say COVID was the best thing that ever happened to my marriage. It saved my marriage, because I, but unknowingly at the time, had started practicing gratitude. I'd started practicing self-care because I had nothing else to do. So in that time, I used to do things to make myself feel better and get through the day and be optimistic and influence the whole family, tell them wonderful things to be grateful for. And we got through that time. We spent a lot of
Mm,
time together, and it was great.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. You're a naturally grateful optimist, it sounds like.
Yes, I am. But that only lasted as long as COVID did. So after that, we got into our busy schedules again, our busy routines. I started jam packing our weekends and our schedules, trying everything in my power to avoid being stuck at home with my family. I wanted to be busy, always have something to do. And the more busy we were, the more stressed we were, the more irritable we were, the more misaligned we were, the less we understood of each other. And I'll tell you, the low for me was, when it sort of started, was when my mother-in-law came to visit, and my husband and my mother-in-law work each other up quite a lot. She's all over his business, and he's the youngest of all her children, so she's never really let go. And yeah, they started fighting quite a bit, and I was trying to, make peace between them, and just kind of make everything better, which didn't work. I got in the middle of it, and it just escalated. And shortly after, we actually had quite a big argument, my husband and I, at a school event. And unfortunately, yeah, I was very disrespectful. I won't lie. At this event, I'd invited a whole bunch of parents to come join us at a restaurant, and there were a lot of people that we didn't know. I just invited a lot of people, and for whatever reason, my husband was annoyed with me and actually ended up sitting at a separate table to me. And it was so embarrassing because we were with all these people, and he completely stonewalled me, gave me the cold shoulder. It was horrible.
Horrible.
So horrible. We ended up having a verbal disagreement. It wasn't, look, we don't shout in public at each other, but we had some words, and I know people could hear us. And yeah, the kind of things I said to him were quite hectic. And on the way home, he made it clear that I am the problem in our marriage, and in front of the children. So obviously, once again, I'm
Ugh.
defending, and how can you say these things in front of the kids about their own mother? Da, 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 da. And we just had, yeah, we just gave each other the silent treatment all the way home. It was about an hour's drive. And in that time, I Googled, how do you get out of a narcissistic relationship? And I found Laura Doyle.
So, okay, so it seemed to you that you had married a narcissist. That seemed true.
Absolutely. Well, from what I knew from Instagram and Google, I mean,
Right. Right.
in
I
my
know.
opinion, I was doing everything I could to be a great mother and a great wife. I was reading all the blogs. I was going for therapy. I was, you know, in everyone's business, telling them how to be wonderful. um, Gosh, Laura, I was so disrespectful. I used to even send my husband, like, I'd make appointments for him to go for therapy, for counseling, and send him emails. Say, this is the best therapist. I've done my research. You must go see him. And I've written the therapist a letter saying you should talk about this and this and this. How disrespectful. And in that time, I honestly thought, what's wrong with this man? Why is he not doing it? I have now guided him on how to do it, and he must go fix himself.
It's so simple. All he has to do is what you've told him to do, and he just wouldn't do it. Did you take any like online quizzes? Like, is your husband a narcissist or things
All
like
of
that?
those.
Oh,
I did
okay.
them.
And
I
he
did
passed
them
with
all.
flying colors and okay.
Absolutely. So I think in the bad old days, I was influenced a lot by, the wrong types of opinions, by other people's frameworks and their hurt that they might have felt in their own relationships or in the past or whatever it might be. And I let it influence me.
You were
So
susceptible. You were vulnerable. You were in pain in your relationship. So there's no question that in some ways it feels validating, right? There's a deliciousness to someone saying, "Oh, I see how you're suffering and it's not your fault. It's all him." Right? It was
that's it.
yeah, yeah.
That's
So
it.
tempting, but also yeah, full of empty calories, it sounds like.
Yes, exactly, full of empty calories. So yeah, I think the point is that I was lacking that sort of support system, um, and in
Mhm.
that time, my poor husband had become our support system too. So although I was a lot of the gripe that I had was with him, he was my safe space, which had become unsafe. So everything was very confusing, and you know, especially when you start dating someone that young, because like I mentioned, we've been together 21 years, you grow into this relationship with the mentality that he's my best friend and I'll share everything with him. So yes, I did share a lot of my thoughts and inner feelings with him, which once again, in retrospect, is quite disrespectful because a lot of it was hurtful, a lot of it was uncalled for or unnecessary. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we learn as women to share with each other, but if you don't have that community, it's quite hard to find a space to share.
Yeah. So some of the things you were sharing that felt just heartfelt truths to you, like maybe that you thought he was a narcissist. I don't know if you shared that with
Yeah,
him, for
pretty
example.
much.
Yeah. 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 It just felt like these are just things you have to get out of your, yeah, get to self-express, but they were also quite hurtful to him, sounds like.
That's it. Yeah, no, definitely. Um, So that's the bad old days. I think the biggest thing was when we'd had that argument at the school function, drove home in complete silence, the children pretty much crying in the back because they're old enough to see and witness. And I did not grow up in a family where my parents fought ever. If they did, it was quiet behind closed doors. So it was a big culture shock for me to realize I'm in this relationship where we are fighting, we're verbally loud, saying, disrespectful things to each other in front of our children, and we don't even have the decency to not do it around them. So they were completely exposed to all of it.
Oh,
Um,
you probably never thought you'd
yeah,
see it in this place. You thought this would never happen to you.
no, I was never one of those people, but I
Yes.
became one of those people.
Yeah.
That's how I
Wow.
always saw it. And I just never had I never saw my life. If I pictured my life before, I never saw myself being the type of person to even consider getting a divorce, consider running away, consider starting over, raising my children as a single parent. Those were things that I got taught you just don't do.
And
Yeah.
it's good, right? I mean, yeah. Yeah. It sounds terrifying. This all sounds very terrifying.
Absolutely. And, sort of with my background as well, my religious background coming from a Christian family, my husband not very religious at all, I always used to think maybe that's what it is, that we're not aligned culturally. We do have different cultures as well, come from different sort of ethnicities and different religions, and maybe that's what the problem is. And you'd first try to fix that for a couple years, and then you find yourself in church praying and crying and God, why? Um, that doesn't fix it. Okay, so I find myself going for counseling, marriage counseling, like I mentioned. That doesn't fix it. I found myself going for personal therapy, and that was good. I found a lot of things that I could deal with on my own that was about me and on my page. And I really think that when you're looking at yourself and dealing with things that are on your page, yes, you can, that you'll benefit from, because that's self-care, right? I'd also then gotten to a point where I outgrew my therapist because I had gone to her in all vulnerability after shortly before the last fight. And I said, look, I'm exhausted. I'm not happy. I am tired. I'm dealing with a lot of health issues, not my own, my husband's health concerns. I'm drained. I'm working hard as he is. I'm looking after the kids. I'm doing this, this, this. I'm ready to pack up my bags and run for the hills. And she said to me, you should. Indirectly, she said, it's not the worst idea to leave, um,
Oh,
but challenge yourself and just give yourself 6 months to do everything you can to be the perfect wife and see if you can change things. So make his doctor's appointments, make sure he goes to therapy, make sure he does everything he should do, never argue back, don't give your opinion, just keep quiet and do everything perfectly for 6 months.
Jade, is
So I
that
said,
possible to do?
no, it wasn't. I
Okay.
got into a lot of trouble. No, I got into a lot of trouble. I won't lie. But with that mentality, I gave myself the 6 months. And with that mentality, when I found your podcast and I started listening, I was open minded because I'm a girl from the 80s, raised by shoulder pad generation. I was not taught to. This is it. We wore our moms wore their armor, and we were not taught to be vulnerable. We were definitely not taught to apologize first or to let our guard down. I was taught to always have a backup plan, to always have, some money set aside, and always think about the future. And if you get left, don't be left stranded. So even though I was in this long-term relationship, I never got that counsel from anyone older than me or anyone wiser than me to be vulnerable, to relinquish control, and to accept graciously. That was not a part of my framework. But given I challenged myself and I'm quite stubborn, I said, okay, I will try this. I will try these intimacy skills and see where I land, because I've tried everything. I've got nothing left to lose. So that's sort
Wow.
of
I
what I
love
went
your
in with.
openness. Yeah, your willingness and your accountability just shines through too. So I admire that very much. So you were
Thank
willing
you.
to experiment.
I was absolutely, yeah, willing to experiment. And what I think when I first had sort of my aha moment, when I started experiencing or experimenting with the skills, um, it's something that stood out to me, which it just, I don't know how I missed this my whole life, is that men want to be respected as much as women want to be loved. And I feel like tattooing it on my forehead so everyone around me can see it. I don't know how that was ever missed, because the community I'm in, the women I'm around, and I've really built up a community for myself. I've got wonderful women around me, but nobody talks about that. Everybody talks about the amount of love that they want, and the way they want to be loved, and the way that they think men should love us. And since I was a teenage girl, reading cosmopolitan magazines, for example, it's just about you, women, 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 the love they deserve and need and will have. um, but no one talks about men. And having a son, it's also so important to me to make sure that he knows when he's growing up that he deserves respect, and that he knows how to love a woman. So the most amazing thing for me throughout sort of implementing all the skills is seeing how the way I treat their father now, once I've started implementing the skills, the way I treat their father is the way that they should also expect to be treated, or for my daughter to treat her husband one day, and they see it being returned to me. It's beautiful.
Oh my gosh. That's so moving. You're the role model you want to be for your children. And this will be your legacy that you are showing them what's possible and what to expect. Yeah, and and also how to show up themselves because they're little mimics, I bet still. They sound right. They're
That's
still
it.
young.
They're little mimics, absolutely. I wanted to just tell you about the skills that I started implementing, if you want to know,
Oh
sort of
yeah,
what
I
was the
was just
first
gonna
and so
ask
forth.
you, what did you do
Mm.
differently? Let's
So
hear it.
after that long car ride home, that very long car ride home, where I found your podcast, popped my headphones into my ears, and just started listening, and being quiet. So the first skill I implemented was duct tape. I immediately kept quiet for the rest of the car ride home. For the rest of the day, when we got home, I was not going to engage in the rest of this fight. I just kept quiet, and I tried to sort of, help the kids along and just get through to bedtime so we can start over the next day. That was hard for me. I'm a
Oh yeah.
talker.
Oh yeah.
I've got a lot of opinions, and I'm always right. So I used to think. So yes, that was not easy for me to do.
But you did it.
And then I did it. I did it. And then the next day, we actually had my son's birthday party. So I didn't mention that on the day of this big fight at the school function was my son's actual birthday. So, yeah. And then the car ride home, my husband said, "You've ruined this child's birthday and he'll remember it forever." And I thought, no, you ruined it, not me. Yes. Anyways, so so the next day we had a little party at the house, and we were having people over, and it was so uncomfortable. We both just faked it because we at this point had got into sort of our Cold Wars would last like the full weekend. We'd usually have like a bit of a fight on the Friday until the Sunday, and then Monday you carry on with your life, your work life, and then we carry on the next weekend. So it was always this hostile environment where we would, you speak to each other about what's for dinner or the
Who's
kids,
picking
but
up who or something. Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
basics just to get by. Anyways, I had listened to one of the podcasts about someone apologizing about something, and I thought, well, really? Okay. No, I'll save that. I'm not doing like an actual apology, but I just went in with one little one. And it was at the end of the day, and I'd said to my husband, listen, I'm sorry for disrespecting you yesterday at the school thing. That was not my intention. It was the most
Wow.
uncomfortable thing I had done in my life.
I love it. So courageous, right? This was a total stretch. Yeah, you're
That
so
was it.
open. How did he respond to that?
Well, I didn't expect an apology in return, but he just lightened up a little bit, So he sort of put his armor down a bit. I could notice a slight, change in his body posture, and he was just a little bit more relaxed. And then later on in the week, I thought, let me try something else. Now, I hadn't had your book yet. I was just listening to podcasts and I was taking notes. If someone says they tried this, I wrote it down. I'm going to try that. And I'm a full believer in sort of journaling and writing down everything that I want from my life and what I want to try. So I did that. And someone had mentioned that they did it. It was very hard, but you just kind of fake it till you make it. Be fun, be the fun person, and he'll want to be around you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not fun. I am boring. I am bored with life. Nothing excites me. I was not in a great place, but I made it happen. So usually on a Friday, I go out with my girlfriends and we have loads of wine, and then the kids play on the jungle gyms and we pass time to
Yeah.
try get this weekend over. Um, this Friday, I did not go out with my girlfriends. I actually stayed home and I sort of made some food. And when my husband came home, his usual routine was he'd come home, he'd drop his laptop bag, he'd just kind of say, hi, I've got to do something. And he'd go to the study, he'd pass us and go lock himself in the study and play games. But this time when he came home, he opened the door and I said, hi, it's so lovely to have you home finally. And I just smiled and I was so excited to see him. He literally like dropped his bag and took a step back. He was confused. His jaw dropped to the ground. He's like, what do you mean you're excited to see me? He was shocked. He couldn't believe it.
This must have been
I
so
just
fun. You knew what you were doing, right? You were making his head explode. I mean, isn't there, did you feel a little smug about this or was it
I
gratifying?
did. I
Yeah.
literally like when all the excitement was over and I'd said hi to him and he was busy. The kids I ran to the room, closed the door, and did a little happy dance. I could not believe it.
Like a movie. I love it,
It
Jade.
was amazing. It was amazing. And then, starting to see these small changes and his patience grow with me and him become a little bit less snarky and less a lot of things. He was still loud at this time. Um, but a week later, so this was like the one weekend. No, so the following weekend, a week later, we had another school event. Um, and he said, there's no ways in hell I will ever attend another school event. So I said, that's fine. I knew. I knew exactly why. But in the bad old days, I would have gone into like a big fight and told him, great fathers would be there for their kids and you're not so great right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
or whatever
Yeah.
disrespectful things I could think of. And this time I just kind of said, that's okay. I relinquished control. And I said, that's fine. And I said, well, I'm taking our son. And I took our son and I left my daughter with him for the day. I did not tell them what to do. That killed me. I literally had to bite my
Physical
tongue.
pain from not telling him. Like how to feed her or what to do with her that day. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, she's quite grown. But, usually I would leave an itinerary of you can go do this and this and this. Remember, she likes this and that, and this is how you do it. I just kind of left them. I said bye, and we left and we went to our school thing. And I also didn't bother him, on the phone. Usually I would be the one checking in and phoning him and sending him messages. I just left him. And about an hour later, I got a phone call saying, "Are you guys even there? Are you okay? You haven't let me know anything." I was like, "Yeah, we're fine. Cool, bye." And we were gone the whole day. And when we came home, they were so happy. They'd had a great day. We'd had a great day. And everyone was just happy to be around each other. And it was the first time in a very long time, possibly the first time since we'd been in lockdown, that the whole family was just peaceful in each other's company.
Wow. Wow. And you knew exactly how you had made that happen. I give you all the credit for this, for the
Thanks.
whole family having a great day, right? Yeah. Having it be harmonious and like a happy together feeling in your
It
home.
was. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
So,
Then the following weekend was Mother's Day, and usually I'd also sort of predict to everyone what we should be doing for Mother's Day. But this day I just, listened to your podcast. I took out some old furniture, started refurbishing it outside, and I was busy the whole day, sanding and painting and listening to podcasts. And at some point, I saw my family, which I hadn't told what to do. And I said, I would love to go for lunch. And my husband took us out for a 4-course meal. We went for a beautiful lunch, and nobody had a fight. There was no
what?
fighting. So it was
What?
the second weekend in a row without fighting. It was amazing.
It
And
is
I
amazing.
fast and furious. Within 2 weeks, I saw my marriage changing and I was sold. So I thought, okay, no, now I've got to try the rest of these skills. I need to know more. So I signed up to every group I could find. I got the audio book. I started listening, and I started familiarizing myself with all the skills. And I still felt a little bit stuck with um, accrediting or validating my own feelings.
Mm.
And that's when I had to try Ouch. Ouch was a hard one for me to try because it felt so weird and uncomfortable, not justifying everything and fighting full steam. But I tried it. My first Ouch was met with a no, not Ouch. And I kind
Oh,
of left it.
uh,
And my second Ouch was in public where we were with friends. And once again, something was said that hurt my feelings. And I said, Ouch. And it was met with a nice explanation of what he actually meant and intended. So the third ouch, I mean, it just takes a bit of practice. The third ouch was met with like a soft, heartfelt conversation about his true intent behind whatever he had said at the time. So that was powerful.
that is. So you got a tender response by the little bit on the second and very much on the third, a tender response
Absolutely.
instead of shouting or verbal abuse might have been.
That's it. Well, Laura, I must come back to the shouting because I think that's something very important, and a lot of women will be able to relate to it. Um, you know, I think we can always justify things and try find explanations for it. And I used to say it's because my husband is ill, because we've been through these traumas. He's the one shouting, though. He's the one that's in the wrong, and I have to suffer in silence. And I felt like a victim. I felt alone. I felt miserable. I felt anxious. Like I started suffering from anxiety, which I'd never had before. And then I learned about the spouse fulfilling prophecies and how amazing are they. What I did is I wrote down what bothers me or what I don't like. So I used to, and I'd love, if someone's listening to understand the power of your thoughts and the power of your words. They are so powerful. Be so careful. I used to obviously tell myself all the negatives the whole time, like, oh, he's being such a, or he is not worthy of my time, or just go fly a kite and I will leave you. That's what I used to say in my head over and over and over, probably 100 times a day. So that becomes my narrative. And what you think about and what you say you want is what you'll have. So I said that over and over, and I was at the brink of a divorce where when I started changing that narrative, it became so powerful in my own mind and in my own heart that I rebuilt our relationship, and we're now sort of in our honeymoon phase again, which is amazing. So I wrote down everything that bothered me, and I wrote down the opposite of it, and I started proclaiming it over him. So the first time he raised his voice at the kids again, I actually said, "That's so unlike you. Is everything okay?"
But that was just like him, Jade. That's what he always did. So, did it feel like you were just lying? Like you had left reality to say something like
It,
that?
it felt like I was going to be bust any time. I felt like I was a naughty school kid for doing this, but the impact it had was amazing. He just became so gentle. And
Really?
before that, I think the biggest change was before the spouse fulfilling prophecies, because yes, there's a lot of power in that, but you need to first clean the slate before you can build something new. And it took me a long time to get to it, but I had to do the formal apology. So, I was trying bits and pieces of the skills here and there, but once I'd done the formal apology and like the official, like we call it, the Laura Doyle apology, it was so much more fruitful. All the work that I put in was fruitful, and it was met with compassion and understanding. I had written down like pages and pages and pages. My apology was long because was really practicing vulnerability and accountability. And I went back to 21 years ago where my husband had given me a gift that I returned, for example. And I'd gone back into a lot of different types of things that had happened to us over the years. And I just, instead of saying to him, we need to talk, I said to him one night after the kids were in bed, I said, please come here, I want to give you something. Because the
Mhm.
moment you say we need to talk, they just block their ears. So we went to the lounge and he's like, what is it? So I said, no, just quickly sit. It's just something nice. And I started reading this apology. I said, I'm giving you an apology. And immediately he was like tense and fidgety. And as I read it, and I had absolutely no expectations in return. I was not expecting an apology, a forgiveness, and nothing. He relaxed. I could see his whole demeanor change. He relaxed. He became so calm. And in that apology, and I think this was the key for us and our specific sort of relationship dynamic, I apologized to him for trying to parent him and teach him how to be a parent. I told him that I'm a woman. I know how to be a mom. I have no idea how to be a father. So for me to tell him how to father his children was completely wrong. The reality is we were stuffing up our kids anyways. Our fighting was ruining them. So what there was nothing left to lose. I might as well risk him being a father to them. I don't have to defend and I don't have to protect. He's their God given father. He can father them however he pleases, and whatever happens in their life and however they turn out, that's not on my paper. What I do for them is on my paper, but what he does for them is on his. He's
Wow.
responsible for that. That changed everything, Laura. He has become so amazing. He is so gentle with them. He he's raised his voice once or twice out of frustration, but he's apologized,
Oh my
which
gosh. Wait, this is the verbally abusive narcissist we're talking about? Same man?
yes, same man. I've had ample apologies. My children have had apologies. He's become so vulnerable and caring with them
So he's
because I
apologized
let
to
him be.
you too.
He's apologized to me. I, so I was blown away. I was blown away with my first apology. So when I gave the formal Laura Doyle apology, I carried on, and there were key things. Another one that was key is talking too much. I know this sounds crazy, but one of the most offensive things he used to say to me is, "Can you just keep quiet, woman? You talk
Oh,
so much." And that would hurt my
ouch.
feelings, and I would feel so
Absolutely.
rejected. But then I
Absolutely.
got it. Once I started practicing self care, I got it. I realized that my girlfriends fill a certain part of my life, and my husband fills a certain part. My girlfriends are my community where I can talk a lot. My husband doesn't need to know every thought and feeling and brainstorm my feelings with me. It sunk in. So when I apologized for that, he was so happy. And I also did, was sort of the intro of our discussion. Yeah, I did say to him, I realize now I'm the one that was causing this whole family to walk on eggshells. I know it wasn't just you, it was me too. I apologized for, always being on his paper, telling him how to do things. But then the biggest one, which was the hardest for me, was telling him the truth that I actually, before 3 weeks prior or 4 weeks prior, had wanted a divorce. And we'd never spoken about it. Since our discussion just before COVID, we took it off the table. We never spoke about it again. And I said, this is what was going on in my heart. And this was a big risk to take because we'd already made progress now. Who wants to open a can of worms, right? But I explained to him that this is how I was feeling, and I can't live a lie. I need to tell him that that's what I had felt. And the whole time that I gave my apology, I did not expect anything in return. So I didn't need him to validate or unvalidate or, forgive or whatever. But there I couldn't help myself. There I just said, like, just nod if I was in the right direction. And he said, well, I never thought of it in those terms and I would have never vocalized that. But yeah, there was trouble. And yeah, it was so refreshing to just get it all out and take accountability.
Wow.
And
So accountable, Jade.
oh, it's
Amazing.
amazing.
Who does this? Who apologizes for everything for 21 years, including what was in your heart that he didn't even know about, that you could have just papered over, just set aside somehow? But you really cleaned your side of the street, sparkly, squeaky clean.
That's
And
it. And now I've got the rewards of it. I'm reaping the benefits because once I cleaned it all up. He actually got up, he gave me a big fat hug and said, I forgive you, and it's over. And we moved on. And the intimacy became so much better. We became vulnerable with each other. That when I do say something like, ouch, he actually meets me with understanding and grace and wants to explain, where previously he would just fight back or run away. And when I say, I would love, I get a lot of things. Have I told you about I would love? Oh my word. The
tell us
first
about I
one,
would love.
my desires, my pure desires. The first one was an accident. I didn't mean to. So I literally told him, I would love to start sculpting again. When I was in high school, I used to sculpt with metal. So I used to weld. And I said, I would love a welding machine again because I haven't sculpted in years. 2 days later, I get an Amazon delivery and he says to me, just open it, it's for you. And it's a welding machine.
No way. 2 days
That
later. So he
is
ordered it on the spot.
on the spot. It was so strange, but I was blown away by the power of the skills. And then I thought, okay, let me try it like with intent. Let's just see if this really works or if that was fluke.
That could have been a fluke. Yeah.
It could have been, So it was middle of winter at night, very cold. And I offered, because now I started caring and I started doing nice things again. So I said, would you like a cup of tea? He said, yes. And I said, I know he likes lemon in his tea. And I realized the lemons are outside on the tree and I'm not going out. It's too cold. So I said, I can't pick a lemon. And nothing, there's crickets. So then I said, I would love a lemon. He said, I heard you the first time. I'm just getting my shoes on.
He's all over it. He's all over it.
And went to get a lemon and oh, I've been so spoiled. He does anything he can to meet my desires, and it's really just because I am relinquishing control. The biggest one is our new family car. I literally, and this was so strange, we went to the mall with the kids. This was about 5 weeks into practicing the intimacy skills, definitely after the apology. And we went to the mall. There were all these cars on display. Now, usually I would freak out. I'd hold the kids by the arms and keep saying, stand still, don't touch a thing, don't run off, you're going to get stolen, don't touch this. And I'd freak out. And this time I didn't. I was just done controlling people. So my husband's looking at the car. Instead of me shouting at the kids, I let them just get in and they're having a look at it. And he says, "What do you think? Do you like it?" I said, "I don't know, whatever you think." And 2 days later, he said, "Okay, I've sold your car and I bought that car." So, oh, okay, that's nice. And it's an upgrade. It's so fancy. It's so nice. It's a new family car for me to drive, and oh,
You loved this new car. This is something you
love
love.
it, love it. So, the list goes on. For my birthday recently, he bought me a new cell phone, and I said, "Why? My old phone was perfectly fine." He said, "Because you kept saying you want one. I heard your desire." I said, "What do you mean?" Because I promise you, I'd never said I would love a new phone. Apparently, every time I said, "Oh, the battery's dying," or, "The camera is not working well," that was him hearing my desire,
You could hear it.
apparently, that I needed. So he actually knows what I need before I need it. And he's so in tune with me. It's amazing.
It is amazing. What a miracle. Especially for a narcissist to be that tuned into someone's needs. Huh. That's interesting. I just love these stories. It's so exciting. And it sounds like you got results very quickly, Jade. Like you saw him
Gosh.
transform.
Absolutely. I got results extremely quickly and I was just blown away. Another one which I totally loved was when he was busy with the kids again and he wasn't shouting at them at this time as much, but he was still loud and sort of yes, he's their father. He should probably be quite bossy, I suppose, but it was just like in their business and on their page. And I went to the room a bit later where he was lying down. This was after they'd gone to bed and everything had happened. And I said, I agree with what you did here and there about, the moral or the principle of whatever the discussion was about. I just said, yeah, I have your back and I agree with that. And he says, but, and I said, no, there's no buts. And he was just like shocked. He couldn't expect or understand. He was expecting me to come and
Correct.
attack him about something and correct him. And I did that a few times where I would start complimenting his parenting or point out something he's done right. And I think this is part of the spouse fulfilling prophecies where you just, sort of highlight the things he's doing right and good. And he didn't trust it at first at all. He'd always say, "And what? What do you want to say?" And sort of start um, gaslighting me a little bit. And I just left it at that. And then he would calm down and everything would be resolved.
Now, that must have felt like an incredible stretch because it sounds like you didn't really admire the way he handled that situation, but you decided to focus on the part that you did like
Yes.
and only on that part. Did you feel fraudulent at all?
Yes, I did. And I think, if I recall correctly, there was a day where I had said something and he gave me a look where it was almost like, are you playing with me? I've known him long enough to know that that look meant I'm onto you. So
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it felt fraudulent. And I remember listening to one of your podcasts with a guest that mentioned where there is gratitude, there is no room for resentment. And I wrote that on a post it and stuck it on my mirror so I could read it every day. And I forced myself to find 3 things to be grateful for every single day because it was hard. I was filled with resentment. I had so much of it. Years and years, because I'm a calm, nice person. I don't shout, so no one knows when I'm angry or resentful. I don't pick fights. I do defend myself, but I never pick them. And I just had to push myself to a place where I had something to fight for because I'd already, given up. And in my heart, I knew that I don't want to give up. In my heart, like the honest truth, when you in your rawest, when you're lying on the bathroom floor crying because you just are so broken and so sad, and this is not the life you imagined, and you're so unhappy. That's when you hit rock bottom, and you have to really reflect and be truthful with yourself. And like I mentioned earlier, I enjoy journaling, so I always write my true feelings. My husband hates reading, so I'm safe. He's not going to read my journals and my diaries. I just write it all down and in its truest form, like nobody's ever going to read it until I figure out my own feelings. And even at my lowest low, rock bottom, where I was so sad, I literally felt like, what's the point in any of this? In like life itself. I wasn't suicidal, depressed. I was just so sad. At that point, I still said, but this is what I want. If we take it away from me now, will I feel better? No. This is actually what I want. I want this. I just want it to be better. And that's what gave me the motivation to be grateful every single day. Find 3 things to be grateful. And the more grateful I was, the less resentful I was. And because I'd apologized, also, that was one of the things, it was my deep, dark secrets in my own heart. I apologized for resentment that he didn't even know I had, you know, and I put it out there. And the moment I apologized and I was forgiven, I just felt so free. I felt like I could just be honest and accountable and transparent without having to explain a thing. It was very
Wow.
liberating.
So impressive, though. This takes so much courage, all the things that you're describing. And it sounds like you've implemented every single skill. And it also requires so much humility. So I'm so impressed by the lengths you went to create the vision that you had in your lowest, most hopeless moment. You were clear that you still wanted this marriage and you just wanted it to be better. And so you took massive action along those lines, and the results are incredible, so inspiring. What is your marriage like now?
Oh, my marriage now is wonderful. I do feel like I should just put this out there. I'd love to renew my wedding vows because I feel that it's new. My marriage is beautiful and new. In the bad old days, at some point, I'd remove my wedding ring to see if my husband would notice. I wasn't wearing it for a few months. He had no idea. And when things started going better, I put it back on, and it was so symbolic to me, but still, he had no idea. And I just thought it would be so lovely to renew our wedding vows because to me, it feels like we're in a new marriage. My marriage now is so beautiful. Laura, this man compliments me, and he gave me the most precious and powerful compliment, which carries me through my days. I'm telling you, he said to me, and this was uncalled for, unprovoked, he just said it. He said to me at some point, he said, "You are the culture of this family." And that was so empowering to know that I'm the culture of our household. The way I act, the way I behave, the way I love myself will be reflected from my children and my husband. The moment I am down in the dumps, I've got nothing to live for, I'm sad, I'm gloomy, the whole family feels it. The moment I implement my self care, I go to gym, I make nice meals, my family reflects it back and they're so happy to be around me. And that fuels me again. So, right now, let me put it this way. My husband eats my cooking, which he never used to do. He used to be the cook because he never liked my food. He now eats my cooking and he compliments it and tells the kids to have seconds because he loves it. He is in tune with all
That's
my
sweet.
feelings and my needs. I laugh at his jokes again. He's become funny again, um, which for a long time I was not doing. And my children are happy. They're not fighting with each other. They are approachable. They are less anxious, less angry, physically healthy. I hear laughter in the house. They sleep through the night. They don't have any night terrors. They are obedient. I don't need to bribe them or like it's the impact it's had on my kids. If people are going to do this, even if you don't want to do it for yourself or your marriage, do it for your children. It is amazing.
Wow, you must feel so proud as a mom, so proud that this is what you've created and that you've
I
given them
am.
this emotional safety to that there's laughter again and there's no night terrors, that they are thriving, it sounds like.
Absolutely. They are thriving, they are happy, they are safe, and they know they're safe and they feel safe. I mean, our family now, I want to spend weekends together. So we make a point of not overbooking and overscheduling. We make a point of one day out of the weekend we spend together, just the four of us, without friends, without other family members. And we try not go out the house on that day. We just garden or paint or play or do Legos, whatever it might be. And it's so empowering and peaceful and beautiful. It gives us the strength for the rest of the week. My husband checks in with me at least 3 times a day. He has started mimicking all the skills. He
Really?
often says to me, "Whatever you think, you know best."
So sweet. Well, he sounds absolutely wonderful.
No, he's divine. He's so sweet, with this as well. Um, yeah, it's funny. It's so funny. I never thought I'd be the one to say that. But even with coming onto this podcast today to speak with you, I obviously haven't ever shared all the details of the skills with him, but he is aware, he sees the fruits of it. And we've had a quick brief, because I don't talk too much, a brief conversation about our relationship, and he admitted that it's really become so much better and he loves it. And I said to him, babe, it's because I've really invested in this program and I'm committed to it, and to me it's important to surround ourselves with people that are the same as us, people who are willing to give what it takes and not give up and be positive and all the things. And he's also taken that stance. So we both surround ourselves with people that impact us in a healthy way and affect us in a healthy way. And when I said to him, I really honestly believe that we have not gone through all the drama and the bad old days that we have for no reason. This needs to help somebody else. We need to share our testimony to help somebody else. He said, okay. He gave me his blessing, which is just in the bad old days he wouldn't have. So it's
Wow.
amazing.
Well, it reflects his confidence that he is, it sounds like he feels successful as a husband, which he is. Actually, he is. And I give you all the credit for this incredible transformation, right? Like you have really done something extraordinary. Where the divorce word was just kind of right there. The whole concept was just right there. And you turned and made a different choice, which even though you felt lonely and hopeless and you weren't sure there was a way through, it didn't sound like you had any uh yeah, hopelessness, right? Was kind of the theme.
Mm, mm,
But you took all these action as experiments, trusting your faith, right? Choosing your faith instead of your fear. And the results are just tremendous, like amazing. So, what do you think it would be your tip to somebody who is stuck right now where you were? She's living with someone who there's verbal abuse. He's uh, probably a narcissist, and she is having to do everything. There's exhaustion there. She's walking on eggshells trying to preserve the peace, but it's not happening.
mm.
How can she get what you have now where the metal, the sculpting thing from Amazon. What was it? It was
Oh,
they're like
yes, a welding
a
machine,
welding
a
machine comes two
metal
days
welding.
later, and he's so proud of her that he supports you coming on this podcast to share about it, and she wants to create a home where it feels harmonious and her kids feel safe.
Mm.
What's your tip for her?
Absolutely. So I would say to that person, and even if it was me a few months ago, keep quiet for a little bit. Just duct tape. Get out your book, start journaling, reflect, find out what your true desires are, what are your true feelings, and get to know yourself a little bit better. Get off his page, get onto your own. And, that's just the beginning. I could go on forever. That's just the beginning. But once you do that, you'll start learning how to implement self care. Once you do that, you're going to be happier in yourself. And, this is something I've always said, even to my husband when I was super unhappy and super honest. I'd always say, you cannot give me everything. You cannot fulfill me. You cannot give me everything. I said it in a very ugly way then. But the intention behind that or the meaning behind that is don't expect everything from one person. You're responsible for your happiness. So find out what makes you happy and do those things. Make time for it. And then once you're happy and you're fueled up, you can be a great wife. You can be a great mother. And stop trying to solve everyone's problems. That was one of my biggest ones where my husband would just want to tell me about his day and I would tell him how he should have done it. And if he'd done it like this, the problem wouldn't exist. And just say, I hear you, and then let him talk, because the awesome thing about that is the favor gets returned. Now that I can hear him, he hears me. When I talk, he actually listens and he hears me. So start with, what is it that you really think? What do you really feel? What do you really want? Often we're cold, we're hungry, we want a bit of chocolate, or we just want a bit of peace and quiet. And it might be something really simple to solve. And the biggest thing is don't give up. Don't give up. It's hard. You pick your hard. Both ways are hard. Divorce is hard. Marriage is hard. You can't have it easy. Then it's not worth it, I suppose. But you can have it good.
Mm,
So don't give up. Stick it out. It's going to be just as hard, but you can have it good. And the end result of all that hard work is just going to be so fruitful and so beautiful. And if it's not, which I doubt, slim chance that it's not, you've put everything into it and you've done everything you possibly can to make it work. And you can go to bed sleeping with a smile on your face at night.
love that. Beautiful, inspiring. I feel like you are standing for the listeners, like anybody who is still struggling and feeling alone and hopeless, like you did. She's not, you're not alone and hopeless anymore if you're listening to this, right? So it's very moving. What would you say to Jade if you could go back in time and tell her what you know now?
Sure, so many things, but I think I would say when you become a wife or a mother, don't lose who you are in this new role. This new role is an add on. It's plus Jade. It's Jade 2.0 and then 3.0. It's not Jade is gone, now you're mom, or Jade is gone, now your wife. You're Jade plus that and so much more. And I think often as women, we want to be the martyr or we want to be the hero, however you see it, but you always sacrifice something. Heroes sacrifice, and so do martyrs. And you don't need to. You can just be yourself and you can live your best life and carry on being happy. Don't let it go.
Mm. Love that. Well, I definitely want to congratulate you, Jade. You richly
Yay.
deserve the Best Wife Award. And here it is. I can't think
Thank
of a
you.
better example of somebody being courageous and humble and accountable and committed and determined and wise and insightful in really creating the family life that you dreamed of and that you really desired. And you make it look easy. I know that it takes a lot of focus, and I just admire so much all that you've put into this and the results that you've created. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for sharing your skills. I think it's so much easier to just keep it to yourself. You can move on. You've saved your marriage. It's happy. It's wonderful. Move on, and it's so much easier to do that. Thank you for not doing that. Thank you for sharing it and inspiring everyone else around you. Really, it's made a huge difference, and I wish that we had this generational wealth of knowledge going through, and hopefully from this movement that will happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yep. And actually, I don't know that it ever was an option to just keep it to myself, as I need to hear your story just as much as anybody else to stay inspired. And so I'm so grateful for your contribution to ending world divorce and keeping my marriage shiny and amazing, Jade. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for interviewing me, Laura. It was so lovely to meet you.
You too.
If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes.
If you enjoyed hearing the real life story of how my guest made her struggling marriage playful and passionate again, then subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. On next week's podcast, I'm going to share powerful tips on anger management for women, including 3 simple steps to stop. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that when I was a kid, my mom would take me to the mall and I'd run ahead into a store and tell them I was lost to get a lollipop and attention. Drove mom nuts, but finally I stopped when I turned 27. Good times.